talk. Please welcome Lance James. He's the head of production at Versus Evil, and his topic is called Let's Launch. So please welcome Lance. Yeah, you can start it right away. Yeah, and I'll just switch your presentation right on.
Howdy, everybody. So two quick things before we get started. First off, I apologize for my grammar or accent or whatever you want to call it. Come from a small country called Texas. Isn't really known for education, so I'll do my best. But I do just certainly have some little phrases and stuff that some of you might not be familiar with. Secondly, this whole thing is based on my experience and the games I've been around and the experiences I've been part of. So I hope some of it's useful for everybody. I hope it's really helpful, but this is all strictly my experiences. So getting into that, we're going to go over a few different things. We're going to talk about myself for a little bit, just so you know my backgrounds. We're going to talk about your games and development, what that means to finish your game. We're going to talk about some of the pre-launch opportunities you have that you should think about when you're getting ready to launch your game and what that means. And then we're actually going to talk about the actual, process of launching your title and what that means, what goes into that, and what you should be thinking about when you do launch your title. So a little bit about me. I've been around the industry for quite a while. Back in 1998, I actually played Age of Empires 2 professionally. That was awesome and a great experience, and how I actually got into the industry, made lots of good friends, and that's how I've stayed in the industry, quite frankly. I made friends everywhere I went and kind of worked with some great studios, great teams. Worked with Tryon Worlds, had the opportunity to work on some great titles there. I went to Versus Evil in 2013. I worked on a ton of different titles there. Kind of the key takeaway here from all of this is that I've worked on titles ranging from 500-person teams all the way down to one developer teams, and I've launched games on, at this point, everything from PlayStation 2, Xbox 360 and higher, pretty much, PC, mobile, VR, what have you. I've worked kind of across the board on almost every platform with developers of every shape, size, location. I've worked with developers all across the world, everywhere from here to China to Japan, South America, Brazil, Argentina, all over the world. And every developer has certainly their own challenges, their own experience, their own expertise. But as a result of that, I've got a lot of great experience. So on that, let's talk about developing your title. The first part is actually pretty important. Is your game ready? And that's always a tricky question, because the short answer is no. Your game will never be ready. One of the fun things I've learned about developers is that they, if they could, they would always develop their title and they would never launch it. Development for a lot of developers is a very fun experience, right? They're working on their process. It's an art. They're always improving, always adding features, always adding, quality of life things that makes their game a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. But short answer, no. We're going to talk about three kind of key areas here when we get to development. So let's go into the first part, I guess, real quick. So development itself. I already said, your game is not ever finished. What you have to do as a developer is find that point in development that you are happy with your title. And that's one of the things where I generally go to my developers and ask, are you finished? Are you happy with what you have right here in front of you right now? And if the answer is, if there's a hesitation, or if there's a problem, or if there's something they're not happy about, then we talk about it, because there's two sides of it of development, right? There's the, if I could, I would develop forever and keep adding features, keep improving my experience, my title. The other side is that somebody's paying for your time. Maybe you're paying out of your pocket. Maybe you have a publisher. Maybe the world is changing and what you were developing is kind of fading out. There's all sorts of factors that come into play that you as a developer have to think about when you are trying to finish up your development. But it comes down to that point where you have to find that happy point where you're happy with what you've developed. And that's for every game, for every genre, that's going to be a little bit different. There's a few key things that get thrown around in there, right? It's, You can't ever go back. Like once you put your game out, once you say it's done, once you launch it, you can't go back and say, "Oops, I'm gonna pull it back. I'm gonna relaunch it a couple years later." That has happened. Is it good? No, not exactly. It's not a great thing to do. Like I say there, you only get one real opportunity to launch your title, and that includes stuff like marketing beats, PR opportunities, first party opportunities with a Microsoft or a Sony or Nintendo. They really only care about the first time you launch. That includes stuff like early access or what have you. When you put your title out there and when it's live for consumers or players to get a hold of, that's your launch. That's your one opportunity to get out there and make an impression on people. Recently you see a lot of titles going to early access, and some of those games do it really well. Some don't. And that's one of the problems, developers have, is that maybe they put it out there too soon, or maybe they didn't have their full cycle complete, or maybe they didn't give enough content. But in reality, those players will see it in early access, and they may or may not come back. Chances are they won't come back if they had a bad experience. Now, there's a few exceptions to that. I'll just go ahead and say the big one is No Man's Sky. They launched, and it was not what they were telling people the game was, right? Like, it was review bombed. The experience wasn't great at launch. However, 4.5, 5 years later, they've stuck with their title, did constant updates. They've worked their ass off, to their credit, and they've turned it around, right? They had a horrible launch. It was not great for them. They were smeared in the news everywhere, but they stuck with it. They persevered, and they stayed with it. They turned their horrible launch into what is now I forgot what the player count is, but they're top 10 on Steam once again, where they've been performing quite well, and they've turned all the reviews around. They've done what most people don't, is they stuck through it, through the finish. The biggest thing that I always give my developers is, generally speaking, as a publisher, is when I see a development schedule, a production schedule, I will typically always add in 3 to 6 months more time for developers. That's one of those things where I always see developer coming in or developer coming to us, and it's like, we're going to have this game done by Christmas or whatever, right? And whether it is they didn't factor in enough time for QA, or they didn't factor in enough time for what if somebody gets sick, or what if somebody goes on a holiday, or just the basic kind of management style of things. But there's also the factor of, is your game what you want it to be? And that's more so in the QA and the quality feedback type of things you may get from players, or internal feedback you get from you playing your own game. You need to give yourself enough time to finish, and time is easily the most important, or the most valuable resource you have when it comes to development, and how you use that time is also extremely valuable. But I guess the key takeaway here is, at some point you've got to decide what you have in front of you game-wise. Is this what you want to publish or what you want to launch with? And you've got to be happy with it. Moving on to the second part here, porting. So typically most titles are developed either on PC or on mobile, or on one platform to start with, right? You as a developer or publisher, whoever you're working with, at some point needs to think about other platforms, and porting is a big part of that. Certainly some titles do really well on other platforms. Some genres don't. It really just does depend, right? Like RTS typically will do great on PC, not so great on consoles, but still worth doing. If you look at the little chart down there, you can see kind of the worldwide revenue and the breakdown of that. That's important. As you launch your title, I'm sure, as everyone here does, not to be very greedy, is you'd like to make some revenue. You'd like to make some more money to make more games. And hitting these other platforms will certainly help you do that, right? The more platforms you launch on, it lowers your risk. It gives you more opportunities to make money, essentially. However, there is work required. That's something that you need to think about as you're developing. Do you launch I'm just going to say, for example, you're doing it on PC to start with. Do you factor in keypad support or gamepad support? Do you factor in touchscreen support when you're developing on PC? Does your UI, is it console friendly? Is it TV friendly? Is it mobile friendly? Those are all things you could think about as you're developing on your main platform that may affect others. You can also think about the size of your game and what assets are loaded how, or how you handle your assets. Certain things work better on PC than they would, say, on the Nintendo Switch, for example. So those are all things to think about as you're developing your title, and should be early on development, something you think about what platforms you want to eventually launch on. Now, I've got SimShip listed down there, and that's also a very valuable tool. And basically what that means is launching all your platforms at the same time. Downside of that is it's a lot of work up front and usually a lot of time. If you're solo publishing, doing it yourself, it's a lot of work and it can be very tricky. It can be very tricky even getting dev kits, depending on where you are in the world and what your title is. Even for publishers, it can be very tricky because it adds in time and other headaches like PR and marketing efforts. There's a lot of things that go into a sim ship that are very valuable because you do get more bang for your buck, so to speak. All your marketing efforts will hit every platform. All the consumers around the world will have their opportunity to pick what platform they want to play the game on. It's really valuable, but it is a lot more challenging. But that's something you, as a developer or you as a publisher, need to think about. There's pros and cons to it, certainly. And if you can, I would recommend sim shipping, but not always the easiest opportunity or easiest choice for everyone involved. So next part of development is QA. This is something that I find a lot of people don't give enough time to really factor into their schedules. So quickly, there's lots of different kinds of QA, right? There's general quality assurance, there's functional quality assurance, there's localization quality assurance, there's certification quality assurance. I'm sure there's plenty more as well. What it boils down to is you need to find what's right for you and what's most impactful for you. Certainly your title, your genre will, kind of dictate what may be more valuable. If you're doing something that's very established, like UE4 at this point, maybe you don't need a ton of functional or optimization QA. Maybe you just need more, qualitative or just general quality assurance QA. Maybe you're doing something really high end or really new or what have you. Maybe you're working on the latest UE5 tech. Maybe you do need more of that FQA where they're checking the optimizations, checking all the technical and engineering specs to see what the game is doing on top of general quality assurance. I would take your time and explore and talk to, there's tons of great outsourcing companies out there that do QA. There's tons of experienced people out there that have done QA. I would just take your time and explore those options, see what's a good fit for you. Certainly LQA is something I would highly recommend that not enough people take advantage of. It's one thing to localize your title and get the localized text within your game. And certainly you might be able to go through and spot check certain localization errors, right? Like maybe this phrase in German goes outside the text box, right? That's really easy for anyone to spot. The harder thing is kind of that contextual localization QA. If I make a joke in German, does it translate well when I translate it to Chinese? Does that carry the same tone? Does it mean the same? Does it have the same impact as what the writer was going for in a different language? Maybe that joke doesn't translate well. Maybe that phrase doesn't translate well. Maybe it's a male versus female type of thing that doesn't translate well. There's tons of localization QA things that's very valuable that can come in and shape how that game is actually reviewed in other territories. And once again, I would say take advantage of as much QA as you can afford, and that's both money and time. QA will save you long run in terms of bugs, in terms of consumer feedback, in terms of player feedback or first party feedback. Or if you do cert QA, they could save you several rounds of going through cert because cert QA will find all sorts of bugs and TRCs and XR failures. All that stuff will help you if you have the time to do it and you make time for it. And certainly there's the cost factor involved as well. The last point there is, when are you QA complete? So that's going to be a little different based on your publisher or how you operate as a development studio. Internally, for most studios, we like to say that we have no priority bugs, no A's, no B's, and as few C's as possible. And D's or E's, or which are kind of really minor stuff, will be very different based on what they are. But once again, depending on your studio, things might be different. You might have some Class A bugs that are Unity issues, right? Or Unreal issues that you can't solve. So what do? Do you let that go? Do you try to fix it? You might have issues with, I don't know, something that's out of your control. It could be an engine bug. It could be a platform bug. So what do? Do you contact the platform and try to figure that out, or you just go ahead and launch? And those are decisions you need to make as a studio. What I would recommend is trying to get rid of as many as a priority and game progression bugs and kind of those bugs that consumers will see as you can, quite frankly, because that's only going to make the experience better. Going back to my first few things I talked about, is you only get one opportunity to launch your game. So the more time you spend in QA, the more bugs you can get rid of, the more issues you can fix in QA, the better off your product will be, and the better the consumer experience will be. So talking about that consumer experience, one thing to help with that is playtest and betas and open betas and closed betas and all that good stuff. So that all revolves around getting feedback. Maybe some of it is finding bugs or issues or what have you. But the bigger aspect here is you've been developing the game for so long or working with the game for so long that you're so close to it, you are missing out on valuable feedback that could impact your title, impact your game. And it's one of those things to get outside feedback and get fresh eyes on the title where, maybe this person's never seen the game, they come in and play it and they'll give you brand new feedback you've never heard. That kind of feedback is extremely valuable because it'll help give you a fresh perspective. It'll give you the opportunity to think about something that maybe you've been too close on, and it just helps make that experience better. If for example, you do a open playtest for like Super People is my example here, and they've made tons of changes based on some of their open betas. But it's pretty common these days to see these beta events, especially for multiplayer games or for shooters or what have you. And that's all about finding what feels good, and what feels good to the most amount of people. Certainly, this is something I hope you all know by this point, is that you're not ever going to make anyone happy, or not going to make everyone happy, rather. Some people will always disagree with you based on this map is too hard, or this gun fires too fast, or whatever, right? Someone will always be upset. You can't make everyone happy, but the goal is to make as many people happy as possible. And that's where this kind of feedback comes into play. If everyone agrees, or 90% of people agrees that this one thing, this one map, this one character, whatever, too strong, too weak, what have you, that's really valuable feedback for you as game developer, game designer, to go in and make those changes. I've got kind of closed beta, open beta here as question marks, and that also is important. I say beta kind of loosely because it's not a development beta. This is much more of a kind of marketing beta type of event. But basically, it's the idea of, do you want to open this thing up to the public, to the masses, and let everyone come in and play it? Do you want to make it a closed beta with selected people? There's pros and cons to both of those things, right? Maybe there's some marketing implications in both of those. Maybe you're targeting a specific group of players. Maybe you want to grab the top 10 sports players in the world to come play your new sports game or whatever, right? That is very valuable feedback, but maybe different than the feedback you get if you open it up to, the global audience. That's something that is important, and I would recommend taking a look at doing both if you have the opportunity to do so. I know a lot of games these days will kind of get some of the esports players of the world and have them come in, look at their title. They'll collect a bunch of feedback, and then they'll open up to the public and have a public feedback. They'll get very different, the feedback they get from those groups will be very different. Both impactful, mind you, and both very helpful, but the feedback they collect will be very different. The last part there is the action items, and this is something I've seen, I'm guilty of it as well, is something I've seen time and time again, is that you do one of these playtests or a beta or anything like this to collect feedback, and then you don't take action on those items. And it's something that it happens often, and it's one of those things that maybe it's just an overlook, an oversight, or maybe there's not enough time in the schedule to allow for this change or this fix or this balance or this tweak. But if you leave that thing there that was there in a beta, there in development, and then you launch your title, you can't expect it to be any different, right? Like if you don't make any changes based off of the feedback that you're given, then you can't expect anything to change. And that's one of those things where I always harp on people, and internally I harp on our own teams. It's like, everyone is saying this character is awful, this character sucks, like we need to do something, or they hate this feature or whatever. Well, we need to do something about it. If we don't do anything about it, that's our fault. And that's the faults. You can't expect any change or can't expect anything to be any different if you don't take action on that feedback you're getting. So you also have a thing here. It's important. Certainly not always open to everybody because it can be expensive, but there's mock reviews. It's another great avenue for feedback for development. I will say that you can do both formal, which is kind of a paid service mock review where you get a group of, a handful of ex-IGN or ex-GameSpot people come in and do a mock review of your title. You can also do informal. If you're friends with people, you can just go ask your friends, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think of this game? What do you think of the writing? What do you think of the narrative? What do you think of the design? And just kind of get that sort of mock review. That's valuable, but certainly a little bit different than what an ex GameSpot or ex whatever may give you. similar to kind of the play test and the betas type of thing is you're going to get feedback. And if, everyone you've paid to give you a mock review, they all say the writing is horrible, well, what do you do? And that's something that you have to decide. Is it worth rewriting? Is it worth, maybe everyone agrees the final boss is too hard. Well, okay. Well, if everyone says they can't complete the game, that's a problem. We should fix it. But mock reviews, if you have the time, the money, and the opportunity, I highly recommend doing, because it's another great avenue for feedback to help you with development, and especially there at the end of development. So I'm going to go over a few pre-launch opportunities. I'm going to kind of go through these a little quicker. But you see, we'll talk about some marketing stuff, some events, and some content opportunities. So pre-launch, before you launch your title, you've got lots of players out there in the field, right, so to speak, that could help you get recognition or promotion for your title. I would say that with any of this, the hardest part for most people is just getting out there and talking to people. And what's difficult about that is you're also trying to finish a game, right? So you can't exactly be developing your title while also be going talking to Nintendo or Sony or IGN or whoever, right, or Twitch or whoever it may be, to talk about, hey, I'm trying to launch my game on December 3rd. Can I get front page? Are there any spotlight opportunities? Are there any store opportunities or any upcoming sales I can be part of? The hardest part about any of this is actually just getting out there and having the time and the opportunity to talk to people and kind of make these connections. Some of these things take months, if not years, to plan ahead of time. It's really challenging to get both your game finished on time and try to line up these marketing opportunities without having someone dedicated to doing this, months ahead of time. That I will admit, as a publisher, that's one of the great benefits of working with a publisher. They have someone that usually does all that stuff for you, so you can focus on finishing your title. But as you can see, there's a few, listed here. I've got the Nindies over there as an example, right? I think we've done that a few times, and that lead time on that is 6 to 8 months. So it's one of those things of, go out and talk to Nintendo, see what their upcoming stuff is for the next year, so you can try to time up your launch with them. Go talk to Sony, go talk to Microsoft. And I say that, and I make that sound easy, but really it boils down to most of these people have folks you can talk to, whether it's an account manager or people at events or what have you. It's just you can't be shy. You've got to get out there and talk to people. Similarly, you've got lots of partners and PR teams you can work with. You can go talk to Twitch. You can go talk to the folks at Intel or AMD. They have lots of opportunities to help market and launch your title. You can go talk to, depending on what you're doing with your title, whether it's just digital or if you're trying to do physical or what have you. You got lots of opportunities to go talk to partners and friends and whoever to help get you more recognition for launching your title. As I already mentioned, timing all that stuff together is the headache. Trying to finish your game and trying to launch on time while trying to meet some of these marketing requirements or marketing opportunities is challenging and does take time and people to work with. Then there's exclusives, right? So those things are usually a little harder to get, but can be very impactful. You can talk to, maybe it's a PS Plus game or a PS Plus exclusive, or maybe it's a Game Pass exclusive. So you got to launch on Microsoft first. Very valuable, right? You're going to get tons of eyeballs, maybe get some upfront money, what have you. But they'll also give you lots of pre-launch opportunity and pre-launch marketing opportunity to let your title get out there and get more awareness for your title. So an obvious one, kind of like what we're doing here, right, is events, right? There's both consumer events and industry events. Certainly each has their own value. Previously talking to partners or first party, that's where industry events are very valuable, right? Things like a GDC or an E3 or a Gamescom even for the business side. That's how you kind of meet more industry people and kind of make those connections and talk to them. Consumer events are a bit more interesting, right? Because you're going to get a little bit of everything. Certainly you're going to get more name recognition for your title, for your company. You're going to let people play your game firsthand. So you're going to get some feedback. You're going to get some recognition. Consumer events, you'll also have first-party people walking around. You have the Microsoft folks who are walking around, the Sonys, Nintendos, whoever. All those folks will be walking around consumer events as well. That's a picture from PAX East, I believe, in Boston. Give you a good example of what a good consumer event looks like. It's just a ton of people walking around, good opportunity for lots of recognition for your title. The last thing there is really key, especially these days, is the store events, right? So things like the Steam Next Fest, right? Really valuable to you getting ready to launch your title. If you can time up a Steam Next Fest right before your launch, that can be really valuable in terms of wish list and recognition. If you time up maybe the Steam Summer Sale to launch with your title, that might not be a great idea, right? You don't necessarily want to launch your game right on top of the Steam Summer Sale. That's a thing you don't want to do. But certainly there's lots of, all the stores, all the storefronts have these opportunities and sales and events to either help bring recognition to new titles or to help promote existing titles. And these are things that you should certainly take advantage of as much as possible. So the last part here is the content deals. And these are things like Game Pass or PS Plus or some of the Epic deals or Epic Store deals. Lots of them are out there. Lots of them are available to you as developers, as publishers, as what have you. The key thing is just being able to go out and talk to Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo or Epic or whoever. And I'll say it again, the key thing here is don't be shy. You have to be able to go out and talk to people and just have the conversation, see what's available, and see what you can and can't do. Like I said, there's lots of these things out there. Once upon a time, there's Stadia as well. There's Twitch is always open to ideas and opportunities. I'll give Nintendo a lot of credit. We've talked to them about lots of opportunities in the past and they're willing to listen, but maybe not actually do just yet. But they're willing to listen to ideas that we pitch them. Epic is the same way, right? Like they're a relatively new storefront. They're doing well, but they're new enough that they're able to try things. So maybe you present them a deal, present them an offer, present them an opportunity, let them make some idea there. I will say there's pros and cons with doing some of these things, right? Sometimes there's exclusivity periods, right? So maybe like the Epic deal says you launch on the Epic Store and you're exclusive to them for 6 months or a year or what have you. They give you, whatever amount of cash, right? Maybe that's good. Maybe that works for you. You have to think about what you're giving up there. Maybe the other storefront you're giving up is Steam. Well, Steam is the biggest PC storefront, and is that worth giving up for 6 months to a year? Game Pass is these days not exclusive, but maybe they do want exclusivity for a year. So maybe you're not launching on PlayStation or Nintendo for a year. Is that worth it to you? There's pros and cons to all of that. Maybe you're not developed for Xbox just yet, and they want it on Win, or maybe you're not developed on GDK and they want it on Win 10. Maybe you haven't thought about that yet. There's all sorts of pros and cons that come into that, and it's just things that you as a developer have to weigh. Is it worth the time? Is it worth the money? Does the money pay out versus what I'm getting up front? Does the marketing, help me launch my title on other storefronts, other locations? Is it worth doing? Quite frankly, it's generally one of those things where we tell developers to just put it on a piece of paper and see if it makes sense for you. So now we're going to talk about actually just launching your title. It's the fun part, so to speak. So always tricky part, right? Going back to one of my original points is your game done? It's one of those things you've got to figure out as developer, as publisher. And then from there, you've got to plan a launch date. When am I launching? There's lots of stuff that goes into play there. Kind of based on my previous slide, I was talking about content deals. Do I have a date that I've got to hit? That's the obvious one, right? If I've got a date with, say, Game Pass, I've got to hit March 5th. Well, obviously, I got to launch March 5th. However, if you don't have any, deal requirements in place, you pick your own launch date. That's where you as developer, you as publisher have to go out there and look at that competitive calendar, competitive landscape and see, based on my genre, based on my platform, what is the best opportunity for me to launch my title? One of the key things that we always see, or I always see, is developers always look within that day or that week of what the competition is, right? I don't want to go up against Diablo 2, for example, right? Like I don't want to launch my game against something like that, or whatever the crazy AAA title is that's taking up all the money or all the market space, right? Like Call of Duty, right? You don't necessarily want to launch your game right up against Call of Duty. However, you also don't want to launch within a couple weeks of that either, right? Because both, whether it's paid media, whether that is advertising, whether that is influencers like Twitch streamers or YouTube folks, whether that is even press outlets, right? They're all going to be busy for the weeks surrounding that launch, right? So it's not just that one day or even that 1 week. You want to think about a couple weeks before, a couple weeks after. What does that look like when you're thinking about your release date? Um, and I do say find your window, and I mean it's hard to do, and certainly in this day and age where there's tons of games launching every day, it is challenging. But you can find windows that work for you. I would also look around globally and see what holidays are happening, see what store sales are happening. Pay attention to all of that information that's available to you to pick the best possible window. This is an example from last year, kind of what fall looked like last year from our perspective, and what some of the titles launched like. And it is challenging, right? There's, as you can see, there's a ton of games launching. Some are AAA, some are indie, some are first-party exclusives, what have you. But you can find titles in there. You can find time in there. Inevitably, which is something I'm sure everyone here is familiar with, is that games slip, right? We know that game is supposed to launch whatever, right? And it ends up being pushed back because of development, because of problems, because of whatever. That happens. So all of a sudden you might find a window in November where there's no games launching at all or no AAA titles launching at all. Might be good to slip in there if you can. If you can. Once again, you don't want to make a bigger headache for yourself, but if you can find a window that works for you, I would say grab it and go for it. So, marketing plans, right? I will fully admit I am not a marketing person. I'm much more of a production person. However, I do have to work with my marketing teams quite a bit. They will develop all these plans, and it's literally, Twitch folks will play. We have press people playing. We've got reviews coming in. We've got all this stuff happening. They've got their marketing plans all lined up, all in sync with various teams, various people, and it is a lot. My first point up there is the important part. It's everyone should be working together. That's what's really important about this is that developer, producers, marketing folks, PR folks, everyone's got to be working together and aware of the plan, right? And everyone's got to be bought in and, part of that plan. If they're not, you'll have problems. Long tail plans, launch events, things of that nature, right? So sometimes you may be doing a full-on launch event for your title, right? It's just at Gamescom, and the Hellsinger guys did their full-on party and all that good stuff, right? That we consider that a launch event for their title. Those things happen. They can be really valuable and leave a good lasting impression, both on consumers, but also on partners and friends and what have you. Long tail plans, that could be something like maybe we talked to Microsoft a year ago, and now they're going to give us marketing on this date because they like the title or what have you. Or maybe it's Twitch front page placement or something like that. Those things just take a long time to get going, but they're very impactful. The third point there is about it's everyone working together, but the bigger point is assets, right? And getting things in place, in order. Usually there's a mad scramble somewhere toward the end of getting a trailer done or, screenshots or whatever, approved screenshots in the right place. The quicker and easier you guys can work together and have a shared place for all your assets and everyone knows what's happening is, the better off you'll all be. The last point there is be flexible because inevitably something will go wrong. Whether that is maybe the game has a bug or maybe you've got Markiplier won't play your game, but he's sick. So now what do you do? Or maybe you've got an online game, but maybe AWS has an outage. Whatever. Something will go wrong. It's inevitable. Something generally goes wrong. Be flexible. Be open to change. Maybe, like I said earlier, maybe there's a window opens up for you to launch your title earlier than you expected. Well, if you're flexible enough, maybe you could jump in there and get that, and maybe you don't have less competition and get a better opportunity. Don't be so locked in on what you're doing and so, dead focus on what you're doing that you're missing an opportunity because you're not flexible enough to kind of pivot or make those changes. It could also be a good pivot too, right? Like if all of a sudden PlayStation comes to you and says, "Hey, our game of the month just, they couldn't make their date. We need a title." And you're sitting there with your game already through FQA and you've got all your marketing stuff ready. Might be a good opportunity for you. And those opportunities do happen, but only if you're flexible and able to do things like that. So this is an example of a marketing plan and how it should work. As you can see, there's lots of back and forth and lots of connected parts there. Certainly, this will be dictated by the size of your team, size of your studio, who you're working with, if you have a publisher, if you don't have a publisher, if you're outsourcing some stuff, if you're not outsourcing some stuff, what have you. Just a quick example of what a marketing plan could look like and what all the pieces involved could be. Um, Once again, I just say everyone should be working together. That's the key to all this. And oftentimes, that's where these things fall apart. Is that maybe the community team isn't working as closely to the PR team as they should be, and they get their wires crossed, or they put out, they reveal some piece of content that they shouldn't have, that the marketing or the PR team was saving for a press exclusive or what have you. Big thing is everyone should be working together and on the same page. So launch prep, which is always a fun one. Typically, I would love for you to get your game done and leave it alone for as long as possible. I don't like last minute changes. I don't like last minute updates to the game. If you're making an update to the game, 5 minutes before we launch it, that scares the shit out of me because, well, not enough time for QA, not enough time to check it, not enough time to verify exactly what you're doing, right? I would love for you to leave your game sitting there for at least a couple weeks, and it's approved, QA'd state, all done, all finished. Other things to do before you're getting ready to launch your game: triple check everything that's going out to public, whether that is storefronts, whether that is your PR messaging, whether that is the timing of everything that's happening. You want to make sure that you triple check everything you have going out to the public. It's just one of those things that it's quick and easy to do. Quickly go through and make sure that all of your pricing is right. Make sure all your checklist on Steam and everything is all good. Make sure you've already been approved to release on Steam. That's something that we see a lot of developers not fully understand is the process to fully release, right? Go through each storefront, make sure that you are good everywhere. If you're not sure, ask. That's the easiest thing to do, right? If maybe you're launching on Xbox, right? Just email the Xbox folks and say, hey, I want to make sure I'm launching at this time. Is everything good? They'll tell you. They'll help you. That's kind of what they're there for. Last bit there is, talk to all of your team members. Make sure everyone's on the same page. Are you good PR guys? Are you good community team? Are you good marketing folks? Make sure everyone understands what's happening when, and if need be, set up little reminders in your email, right? Send little Outlook invites or what have you, just to make sure that everyone understands what is happening when, who's hitting the buttons, who's making it live, and basically just keep sure that everybody's on the same page. And then, hey, you did it. Your game's live. Congratulations. Your game's live on Steam, it's live on Xbox, live on PlayStation. You get a fun day where, you maybe you've been developing this title for a couple years. Great. Awesome. Now my game's live. People are playing it. People are having fun. It's awesome. Sort of. You're not done. It's a good thing, right? You've launched your game. That's obviously a big, huge milestone. It's awesome. But now you start getting in all kinds of other stuff, right? You're going to get analytics from live players. You're going to see how many people are playing your game, what they're doing, what they're not doing. You don't have to do game updates. As I mentioned earlier, your game will never truly be done. There's always things to patch or fix or maybe tweak or balance or what have you. And then what next? That's always kind of the big thing for a lot of games these days is, am I going to keep working on this game and keep adding in DLC? Will I add in a sequel? Will I pivot and make something completely different? Those are things, if you've made a good game, that develop or that consumers want to know. What's next? What are you going to do next? That's always something you have to keep in mind. The last bit there is something that's really important. So I say game life cycle. That includes things like a sales life cycle and consumer cycle. Someone should be thinking about your title long term on the storefront and what that means in terms of its price, its value to consumers, and its kind of its health. I say its health meaning, say I launch my title at $20. How long will it stay at $20? Will it be there for a year, 2 years? What's the lowest I'm willing to put my title on sale for the first year? What's the lowest I'm willing to go after 2 years? And that is a whole value versus health of the title, health of the product type of cycle that someone should be taking, should be planning out and thinking about. Because what you don't want to do is sell your game for $20 and within a year it's on sale for $1, right? You've kind of killed your long-term sales cycle, especially if it's a game that people still enjoy playing and still maybe put out a few updates for, right? What you want to do is keep that game as healthy as possible for as long as possible, because it's it's a good opportunity for you to make more revenue and hopefully keep making more games. So, quick summary. You only get to launch your game once. I think I've said that enough. Take your time, let it bake. That's one of the phrases I use, right? And that's one of the things where I go back and it's like, do you need another month? Do you need another couple months to help make this thing a little bit better? The last thing I want to hear when you launch your title is, man, if I only had a couple more weeks, I could have done this really cool feature. That would kill me on the inside because all you had to do was tell me, and I could have made that happen, right? Take the time you need to make the game you want to make. That's what it boils down to, right? And I can't stress enough. It's important to make the game you want to make and take the time to do that. Working with partners, that includes both internal and kind of external, right? And getting that feedback I talked about. Oftentimes, developers are so close to their product, you're going to miss out on valuable feedback. And listening to that feedback from external sources is really, really valuable. Then last bit, at some point, you have to actually launch your game. You have to hit the button. It's always really scary, and some developers will, if they could, they would live in development forever. At some point, you got to launch your game, and hopefully, once you've kind of went through a bunch of your launch prep and you've thought about what's best for my product and my product's in the best possible state, you will hit that button. That's one of the things you have to do. At some point, you got to launch your game. And it's fun, it's exciting, but at some point, you got to do it. And that is it. That's my kind of experience quickly about launching your game. Any questions or anything?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yep.
I have a question myself as well. Did you have in your practice any cases when developers came to you with a pretty fine concept, but they didn't want to change it in any way? However, it needed to have some improvement because it wouldn't work well in the market, wouldn't launch properly. How did you solve this conflict of interests with the developers, if you had any cases with that?
Yeah. See how to say that very politically. Yes. So certainly had developers not wanting to change their game based on feedback, right? And that's one of those things where maybe me as a publisher, me as a friend has to talk to them and figure out what the best way to communicate that is, right? Because I know firsthand that's happened where we have a bunch of feedback that said the game was really offensive in some way, right? So developer doesn't think it is, but literally every piece of feedback says that you're going to offend these people if you do this. And that's one of those things where sadly repetition helps, where it's like, I can tell you, maybe don't listen to me. I have to go get someone else to tell you. Maybe don't listen to that person. It's like, if everyone we talk to tells you this is offensive, eventually they did listen and they did learn. But depending on what their game is and what they're trying to do, they may not change. And that's just something they're going to have to live with. And that's one of those things that goes into like a kind of like a risk management thing of when you launch your game. And that's something that everyone needs to be aware of. This could be bad. This is one of those things that could come up.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, any more questions from the audience, maybe? I actually have one more.
Okay.
And I forgot it. Regarding the marketing, marketing analysis and stuff. I know that. Well, I've heard a lot of stories from developers who are working on their games and they're doing pretty well, but they don't have any knowledge on marketing, don't have any experience with that. Do you have any? I don't know, tips for such developers, where to find this information, how to follow this marketing analysis, how to do them properly so that they could provide some consistent information?
Yeah. So it's especially true for like indie developers, right, who don't have a publisher, or maybe brand new developers who've never launched a title before. Google is a friend, but I will warn you, even with Google and all the information out there on the internet, you need a dedicated person to kind of do this stuff for you while you're developing the title, because whether it is a marketing opportunity, whether it is an opportunity to get on a new platform, whether that is a promotional opportunity, what have you, someone needs to be working on your marketing plans and your marketing idea kind of from at least the middle of your development onwards, just so that people understand where your title's going and what you're doing. And I say marketing is a broad term that includes stuff like community management, community engagement, PR, social presence, right? Social media, things like that. There's tons of facets of that come into play where someone, or if not a team, needs to be playing a part of that. There's agencies you can get that do strictly marketing for games, obviously, right? There's publishers that do all these things as well. But it's hard if you're just a game developer to do that by yourself, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. But but Google has a lot of information. Obviously, there's a ton of stuff out there on how to launch your game and what to do and marketing things you should be doing. But it boils down to someone needs to be doing it, and it is a lot of time and it's a lot of time, frankly.
Okay then. Thanks a lot for the talk. Yeah,
Cool.
it was a cool one. Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. We will be having a break until 3 p.m. to have some lunch and coffee. So we will see you in a little bit more than an hour.
Thank you.